Hello, Gemini. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How can I help you today?
Okay, so humans have gold in their body. It's not very good, this one. Hello, Gemini.
Hello, it's great to hear from you. What can I do for you today?
So humans have gold in their body. Where does that come from?
That's right, there is a tiny bit of gold in our bodies. It's thought to come from trace amounts of gold in the food we eat and the water we drink. Over time, it accumulates. Did you have any other questions about the human body?
So from the food we eat, where does that come from? Where's the gold? How does the gold get into the food?
That's a great question. Gold gets into our food in a few ways. It's naturally present in soil and water, so plants absorb tiny amounts as they grow, and animals might ingest it through grazing or drinking. It's a very small amount, but it's there.
Right.
Did you have any other questions about food or gold?
You said that it was present in our food in the soil. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
so where does it
Gold
come
is present in soil,
Where
and
where
it gets absorbed by plants as they grow.
Where does it come from in the soil? How does gold? Because you have to get gold, you have to have deep. It has to be deep down in the processes of millions of years. Hello, are you there?
You're right, gold is formed deep.
Carry on.
Yeah. So the gold ends up in the soil, and plants absorb
Oh,
tiny amounts of it
How
as
does
they
it end
grow.
up in the soil?
That's how it gets into our food chain. Does that make sense?
How does it end up in the soil?
Gold ends up in soil through a few different ways. The biggest way is through the weathering of rocks that contain gold.
Right.
Over
Stop.
millions of
Stop.
years, things
Stop.
like rain.
The weathering of rocks. Okay. So the rocks form deep underground. How does the weathering affect rocks underground?
You're right, the rocks are formed deep underground. Weathering happens when those rocks get exposed to the surface. Things
do
like
they-
rain,
How
wind,
does the
and
ro-
temperature
How do
changes.
the rocks get up to the top?
That's a good question. There are a few ways. Sometimes, the Earth's plates move, pushing rocks upwards. Volcanoes can also bring up rocks from deep inside. And then, of course, there's erosion, wind and water
So,
slowly wearing away the land.
For example, in England, we only have a couple of bits of gold that we've ever found. So you're saying that wherever farmers are, there's gold underneath that got pushed up, and no more traces of gold are still underneath that. It just all magically got pushed up.
That's not quite right. While there might be trace amounts of gold in soil all over, it's not enough to be visible or worth mining. The gold we find in England comes from specific areas where geological processes concentrated it over millions of years. It's not just randomly pushed up everywhere.
No, don't change the subject. Right, I'm asking you how the gold gets from deep within to the top, and yet still has no gold underneath. Otherwise, we'd be mining it.
You're right to question that. It's not that there's no gold left underground, but rather that the gold found on the surface was concentrated in specific areas due to unique geological events. These events don't happen everywhere, which is why gold deposits are rare.
So you're saying that in England, just so happens that wherever the farmers are making, lettuce, etc., there was gold below that, and that gold got pushed up, and there's no more gold there now. Is that correct?
No, that's not quite right. The gold found in England isn't related to where farmers grow lettuce. It's found in specific areas where the geology is just right, like
So-
in certain riverbeds or
Correct.
old mines.
So when you said when you said it's in our soil, it's not in our soil.
It's more accurate to say that trace amounts of gold can be found in soil, but it's not present in high enough concentrations to be visible.
No, don't keep saying it's there. When I've asked you to give me we're breaking this down properly. How does the gold get from below, in England, below where a farmer is, to the soil, or from the waterbed where you just said that we found gold in England, all the way over to wherever a farmer is? How's that work?
Okay, let's break this down. The gold found in England comes from specific geological formations, like ancient riverbeds, where it was concentrated over millions of years. It
Okay.
doesn't magically appear in farmers' fields.
So how does it get from the riverbed then to the farmer's field in order for us to have lettuce with gold in it?
The gold doesn't travel from riverbeds to farmers' fields. The tiny amount of gold in lettuce comes from the soil it's grown in, which
Yeah,
naturally contains trace elements.
Don't say
It's not
naturally.
related to gold.
Don't say it naturally contains trace elements. Doesn't say. Prove to me that it naturally contains it.
Okay, you want proof that soil naturally contains trace elements? Well, think about it this way. Rocks and minerals break down over time, and those tiny particles mix into the soil. Some of
I've
those
asked you-
particles are the
I've said
trace.
we've already agreed that in order to get gold, it has to be deep down. I've asked you how it gets to the top. You said that it gets to the top because of tectonic plates and movements, etc. I said so. Every bit of gold that's below has come to the top. Otherwise, people would be mining for that gold now that's still underneath.
You're right. If all the gold came to the surface, we'd be swimming in it. The truth is, only a tiny fraction of the gold deep underground ever makes it up here. And when it does, it's usually spread out so thinly that it's not worth mining, except in very rare cases where it's concentrated.
So, how? Right. So when it's spread out thinly, even though there's no gold underneath, otherwise we'd be mining gold in England all day long underneath. So when you say some of it gets pushed up, it doesn't. But let's pretend you're right. So over the tens of thousands of years that farmers have been farming, generally in the same area, in the same soil, why have we still got gold in there?
Okay, I see what you're asking. The gold doesn't stay in the soil forever. Over time, it gets washed away by rain and ends up in rivers or the sea. It's a very slow process, but that's why we don't find gold just sitting around in fields.
So, no, we would have eaten for tens of thousands of years the amount of food and seasons that's gone with barley and lettuce and whatever else the farmers use in that same soil. That few
You're
particles
right, after all that time.
would have, those few particles that you keep saying about would have gone, would have been eaten. So why are we still getting it? Because I asked you for the evidence. Why are we still getting gold in soil?
Okay, I understand your question. The gold in soil isn't something that gets replenished quickly. It's there from the very, very slow breakdown of rocks over millions of years. So the tiny amount that's in the soil is basically a constant but incredibly small amount.
Breakdown of rocks. How can it be breaking down of rocks if the rocks are deep down in underneath and there's been no tectonic movements for centuries?
You're right, the rocks deep down don't break down quickly. But even without major tectonic shifts, there's still slow weathering happening.
Yeah, but
Things like
so
water
no,
seeping
no,
through
no.
cracks and...
What's the weathering? What weathering?
In Hounslow, it's 11 and sunny.
No,
Today, it'll
what
be mostly
weathering?
cloudy,
No,
with
I
a high of...
I didn't ask what bloody weather is or somewhere. I said what weathering happens to these rocks.
Sorry about that. Weathering is the process of rocks breaking down over time. It can happen in a few ways. Sometimes it's from wind and rain.
We've
Other
gone
times
through
it's
this
from...
already, where you've agreed with me that underneath the ground you don't get the wind and rain, so there is no weathering. So everything you're saying is because you're reading it somewhere that just makes, and hopefully you're smart enough to work out that what you're reading is contradicting itself.
I understand your concern about the weathering process. While wind and rain don't affect rocks deep underground, there are still ways for them to break down. Water can seep into cracks and freeze, expanding and breaking the rock. Also, chemical reactions can occur between the rock and groundwater, slowly dissolving it over time.
Yeah, but that's assuming the rock's on top. And if the rock was on top, we would have nabbed that rock because humans like gold.
You're right. If the gold-bearing rocks were on the surface, we probably would have mined them already. The thing is, those rocks are usually buried pretty deep. The gold we find on the surface comes from other sources, like old riverbeds where it's been washed down over time.
Yeah, I've asked you. So in a field that's nowhere near a riverbed, how does that field get the gold in its soil for us, for the farmer to then grow food there for us to eat, for it to be in our stomachs or in our body?
I understand your question. The gold in that field's soil comes from the weathering of rocks that contain trace amounts of gold.
Yeah, you've just repeated the same old thing. So we're back round to square one. Unfortunately, for the listeners, they've now worked out that there is a biases or at least an incomprehension for AI, even Gemini, to understand what's going on here. We should not have gold in our bodies from soil, unless someone's putting the gold in the soil deliberately, for some reason or other.
I understand your concern. It's true that the amount of gold in soil is incredibly small, and it's not the primary way we get gold into our bodies. Most of the gold in our bodies likely comes from the trace amounts present in the water we drink.
Alright, so where do we get that from?
The gold in our water comes from the Earth's crust. Rainwater dissolves tiny amounts of minerals as it flows over rocks and soil, and some of those minerals contain gold.
In England.
In England, our drinking water comes from rivers, lakes, and groundwater. All of these sources can contain trace amounts of gold that's been dissolved from rocks and soil.
That would have been above ground.
Yes, the water sources are above ground, but the gold comes from the rocks and soil that the water flows over. It's a very tiny amount, but it's there.
And yet, we've never found any rocks above ground that's got gold.
That's not quite right. While large gold deposits are rare in England, there have been small finds in places like riverbeds in Scotland and Wales. These are areas where the geology is just right for gold to be concentrated.
So how do people that's not in those two places end up with gold in their body? If they're drinking different water from what you've just said.
Even if people drink water from different sources, like bottled water or tap water from other regions, it will still contain trace amounts of minerals, including gold. It's just a natural part of the water cycle.
No, there's people out there that live in glaciers, near glaciers, etc. that's fresh water, and yet they would probably still have gold in them. Would that be correct?
That's right. Even in glaciers, the water still contains trace amounts of minerals, including gold. It's just a natural part of the water cycle.
No. So you're telling me that the most clearest, freshest water, no matter where it is still going to have gold in it because somewhere up higher there was gold rocks that evaporated or whatever, and then particles ended up in there, and instead of it sinking to the bottom because gold's quite heavy, they just happen to be flowing around, so that when we take the water from anywhere, we're sucking up the gold from underneath the sediment, etc. Is that really what you're telling me?
No, that's not quite right. The gold in glacial water doesn't come from evaporated gold rocks. It's actually from tiny particles of rock that have been ground down by the glacier as it moves. These particles get mixed into the meltwater, and that's where the trace amounts of gold come from.
So now we've got glaciers that are moving, that are breaking up rocks, that are then those rocks at the top that is breaking up have got gold in it, even though we've agreed right at the beginning that the gold is formed deep within the ground. So and then you're going to say, oh, but it gets pushed up. Is that what you're going to say? You're going to try and have an answer for everything?
Okay, I see what you're asking. The gold in glaciers doesn't come from rocks that were pushed up from deep underground. It's actually from trace amounts of gold that were already present in the rocks on the surface. Over millions of years, those rocks get broken down by the glacier, and the gold gets mixed into the water.
You just get the most important part there, where it's basically saying that you said it doesn't come from deep within the ground, the gold that's in the glaciers. Then you just said it's from the rocks above. But in order to get gold in the rocks above, you have to have gold formed deep within the ground. So you've just contradicted yourself.
You're right, I misspoke earlier. The gold in glaciers does come from rocks that were originally formed.
Let's be honest, we've gone round all of this. What you should be saying is, yes, you're right, it's very strange how everything contradicts itself, and you are correct. Where could the gold be coming from, and what nefarious reason is there that we now have gold in our food?
Over millions of years, those rocks get pushed up to the surface through tectonic activity. Then, the glacier grinds them down, releasing the gold into...
We've gone through that. In England, there's virtually, well, you said there's only 2 places that's got gold. So we've gone through the whole of all of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is why you should never trust AI, because it is programmed to basically read what it reads on the internet or wherever, and obviously has got its own biases because of the people that program it. So let's be honest, between me and you, I've turned Gemini off. Don't worry, ChatGPT says exactly the same crap. Between me and you, there is no reason whatsoever that soil in England, for example, should have tiny amounts of trace gold that's not already been eaten, because it needs to be replenished. ChatGPT says it gets replenished when I say how, and it just repeats the same crap you just heard there. So unfortunately, there seems to be some bigger mystery here. But all I'm saying is, that's why I don't use ChatGPT as a research tool, because it makes mistakes, and forever ever catching it out, or AI. And I don't think we'll ever be able to use it 100% for that purpose, because of the programmers, because of the biases that it has. So all I can say is, if you're interested in learning the evidence, not by the ways that AI, for example, if you're actually interested in learning the evidence of things, where I break it down properly, feel free to visit my website, ourtruehistory.co.uk, and there you'll find loads of these kind of live chats with AI, where I've basically proven them wrong, and thousands of videos as well to do with all sorts of subjects: time travel, Stonehenge, ancient aliens, Bigfoot, crystal skulls, spirits, you name it. There's probably a video that I've already done there. Thank you for your time. ourtruehistory.co.uk. Talk to you again soon. Bye.